I've seen a big run of maybe patients, but also I guess more of a public health element where people are looking at the plant-based diet as a replacement for statins. And I think you've brought up a really interesting kind of point that I wanted to bring up on the podcast, because I think after thinking about the, is juice detoxing really a detox notion, I wanted to clear up a bit of a myth in relation to the plant-based diet that you brought up in relation to choline. And I think it really illustrates the notion that whilst a plant-based diet is incredibly good for someone who is in a later age bracket with, forms of metabolic syndrome presenting in their blood, etc., supplementation is a necessary part of that protocol. Otherwise, you're still actually not doing the whole job with the diet. And I wanted you to comment on that, because I'm happy to be wrong about that statement, but I wanted to bring that up.
You can get around it, Phil. So it's going to be very, very hard to get enough choline from a plant-based diet. You just look at all of the sources in choline, ain't enough. So then you have to supplement with the betaine, which can be a substitute for choline. So choline becomes betaine in the mitochondria, and then betaine goes off and does its work within the next genes to help out the methionine production. So you can substitute with betaine. Now that's things like beetroots and spinach and whole grain foods give quite a lot of betaine. The other thing you can get is directly giving or being sure that they're taking nuts and seeds and foods that are high in methionine. So then you kind of you're putting it right at the top of that cycle, pretty easy to go through. There's only one gene between methionine and SAMe, and that's a gene that if it's blocked and you don't make enough SAMe, you're off into hepatocellular cancer. That's the consequence of not having enough SAMe. The ultimate consequence is going down the cancer line. It's that serious. But if you pop the methionine in, you've only got one possible glitch for it to end up down in SAMe. So you'll find things like Brazil nuts, and there's quite a lot of nuts and seeds. It's not very hard to be getting enough methionine into the diet. So if they can't get the choline, it does mean a bit more problem in actually producing enough phosphatidylcholine, but there's a little bit of movement around within the methionation system to be able to make up for some of that.
I think, as I said, I wanted to clarify that more than anything, because I'm excited about prescribing a plant-based diet to people, because I think for two reasons primarily. I mean, the nutritionally dense foods that people aren't eating are a huge problem. We've talked about this on the podcast many times, about just the fact that people aren't eating enough fruits and vegetables as a start. But I think with the movement onto the plant-based diet, what I've heard from you there is that the diversity is key. If you've never eaten beetroots before, or you've never really delved into a broader range or a broader selection of fruits and vegetables, if you are moving on to a plant-based diet, which does have a great outcome for you in later on in life, it is important to understand that you're going to have to start using food as the supplementation to an extent, such as your point with the betaine and the beetroot, for example, or some of these other things with the whole grains and that thing, that kind of element as well. I didn't want to come across as if I was suggesting that the plant-based diet was insufficient, but more so that there are particular key components of executing a plant-based diet, let's say, for a therapeutic outcome within metabolic syndrome and also fatty liver as well.
My favourite kind of dinner time conversation piece, or whatever, something to throw in as a bit of a joke, related to vegetarianism, strict veganism, is the Buddhist high up Rinpoche, whoever, comes out of the mountains and is hosted in London, becomes a local to teach out in London, and about 18 months on he develops pernicious anemia. Everybody's racking their brains, why he's eating the same vegan foods he was eating in the mountains as he is now. So the doctor who was treating him had pernicious anemia, okay, B12 deficiency. Now why now, after 18 months? That's how long it takes. So he was getting some B12 in the mountains. So they brought down some of the grains and so on that he was eating from the mountains, just from the same old monastery. And there's weevils in the rice. Nobody was vegan. There wasn't such a thing as a vegan. It's just like you couldn't become fully vegan in the past.
It's fascinating,
but our hygienic system can make you actually vegan, and you get sick.
And look, this is where I think this is another interesting point as well, is that whilst I don't think this is the forum to discuss the optimized human diet, because we're never going to know, right? It's going to cost trillions.
It's according
You know what
to
I
your
mean?
DNA and all the different regionalities of that.
It's going to, we'll let Peter Diadamo solve that through Datapunk and see if we can actually get AI to solve it. But the key part about it, though, is that using diet as a therapy is a little different, in that there are ways to use diet as a plant-based or whichever to actually underpin the success of a treatment so that you can get from A to B. And I think, and that's something.
How many people do you ever have to say cut back on your veggies, mate?